Now, the mining industry is considering ways in which it can play its part in the reduction of carbon emissions. Consultancy firm DSS Plus will present its sustainable operations vision at the mining Indaba, which starts in Cape Town tomorrow. For more on that vision, we are joined by Metals and Mining Director Johan Coetzee. Thank you so much for your time, Johan. We appreciate it. Before we get into the massive energy crisis that we are facing in this country at this stage, and with another mining Indaba expected to start tomorrow, perhaps speak to us about what you are planning to present to delegates, the President himself, and the mining industry here in South Africa tomorrow, given the many challenges that we are facing. What exactly are you hoping, what message are you hoping to put out there?
Thank you for having me, Heidi. I think there's probably three key things we'd like to talk about certainly over the week. The first one is, how do we as an industry build more resilience into our own operations, but also into our supply chains? The second topic would be, how do we accelerate the change to a more sustainable version of mining? We'd also then talk about, how do we run our operations better? So how do we become more efficient? How do we become more profitable as an industry to ensure that when opportunities for additional investment show themselves, that we are ready to capture them? So those are certainly some of the key topics we want to cover over the next week.
I want us to speak about the issue of emissions, and I ask this in the context of the fact that we just saw the coal conference that took place this previous week, and we do know the very strong message that the Mineral Resources and Energy Minister Gwede Mantashe normally puts out there, and says that coal is what South Africa can use at this stage, and our coal-fired power stations are going nowhere. How do you take that message, given you're trying to reduce emissions at this stage?
Well, I think globally we've set some fairly aggressive targets to get to net zero by 2050. So it's important that we keep those in mind. The world will need a significant amount of metals for us to be able to make that transition. And certainly our focus area is how do we accelerate that work? And how do we get the industry ready, not only to deal with potential threats that might come as a consequence of that, but also capture opportunities that may show itself. So I think it's an important time for the industry to really pivot towards a more sustainable way of operating.
So you say it's important for South Africa to pivot, but if you look at what is currently happening, we've just been told that the country is moving again into stage 3 and 4 rolling blackouts. We have an energy crisis. We have a president that's saying we could most likely move into a state of disaster, as this is possibly the only way to deal with this energy crisis. How exactly is the mining Indaba going to provide these solutions, but also be positive about this country and its energy supply, given what we're facing?
Yes, I certainly am not anticipating that the Indaba itself will provide all solutions, but I'm hoping it'll create a platform at least to have a conversation about, and with all the relevant stakeholders that needs to be partners in all this journey. The industry itself can certainly not undertake it on its own. Government, society, private enterprise, entrepreneurs will all have to pitch in to make this a reality, and to make this transition happen as fast as we think it should, to be able to get to net zero.
Critics would say that we see the mining Indaba every single year, yet our energy crisis seems to be getting worse and worse. How important is it for there to be not discussions around a way forward and these sustainable solutions to provide reliable and consistent energy in the country, but to make sure that something is actually being done and comes out of this mining Indaba?
Yeah, I think there's already been really good examples certainly in the last 12 months, maybe 24 months of companies that have certainly embraced the challenge and started making that transition on their own. I think this is a journey we'll have to undertake together. And so, we don't have to leave it up to every individual organization to make the transition on their own. We should really think about, how do we create solutions where the industry, government, private sector all work together to solve the problem, and not leave it up to individual companies.
Johan, maybe let's speak about your role and wanting to, incorporate copper into all of this. You're obviously going to have to be working very closely with mining companies and the industry as a whole. And looking at the state of mining, there are many challenges. How are you going to navigate and work through that? And I ask specifically in the context of copper, because we know what happens to copper in this country.
Yeah, so look, I think, certainly our approach is very much operationalizing the different strategies. Companies have put out targets out there in terms of what they'd like to achieve, whether those are operational expansions, whether those are sustainable transitions or energy transitions. And our expertise is in how do we operationalize that? So how do we build that into the organization, in processes, in mindsets, in behaviors, and help the organization drive a sustainable change internally? It's all well and good to put the target out there, but it really is important to build that in as a way of working within the organization. So our focus certainly is on across the spectrum, not only sustainability, but also operational improvement, asset stewardship. Our purpose as an organization is to drive that transformational change within organizations.
Have you already engaged with mining companies here in South Africa?
Yeah, we have a number of clients in South Africa, and we're working across the spectrum with a number of them on these solutions. So, certainly look forward to engaging with a few more clients during the week who would be interested in some of the work that we've done with companies locally.
I want to ask you how, if a state of disaster is declared and government gets its advice on whether or not that is the best solution and legally allowed, is this going to impact the work that you are trying to do, and what do you think it will do to the mining industry?
Look, I think, there's always going to be external factors that impact the industry, and I think part of building resilience into how you operate as a company as well as into your supply chain is really important. We cannot control all the factors that happen external to organizations. And our focus really is on how do we help organizations get themselves ready, by planning in advance and making sure that some of those own goals don't happen inside the organization. It's always going to be hard to control what happens outside the organization. And as much as we can influence, our focus remains on what can organizations do to build that into their own way of working.
But surely there will be an impact, because there will be hopefully no red tape, but there might be some implications if a state of disaster is declared. Do you think it's a good thing if a state of disaster is declared to deal with the energy crisis? Because we have to be honest here, there needs to be urgent intervention when it comes to the constant rolling blackouts. This country is unable to provide reliable and sustainable electricity.
But I think if the intent of the state of disaster is to ease the way or accelerate some of the transition to more sustainable sources of energy, then that certainly presents an opportunity to the industry. Far be it from me to second guess any of that intent, but if that is the intent, I think that'll certainly provide an opportunity for the industry to accelerate that.
Just lastly, Johan, are you hopeful looking ahead at the mining Indaba? Again, I'm going to almost repeat the question I asked you earlier about critics saying, what's the point of having this mining Indaba? But it's quite an important event, because you have many people coming from across the country, across the world actually. You have the president, you have the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy coming to speak about this, but at the end of the day, it's about solutions, and that needs to be the focus given what we face in this country at the moment.
Yeah, look, I'm always optimistic going into the mining Indaba. I think it's the right collection of stakeholders and certainly a good audience to get certain key messages across. So that's certainly the way we look at the Indaba, is to make sure we use that platform to maximum benefit, not only for ourselves, but for the industry as a whole. So yes, I'm certainly optimistic going into the mining Indaba this week. If last year was anything to go by, I think there were some critical conversations had, and I'm hoping the same will happen this year.
Hopefully there is someone in the room that can bring us a solution, because these ongoing blackouts are really, they just need to end. Thank you so much for your time, and we wish you all the best at the Mining Indaba. That's Metals and Mining Director Johan Coetzee on what his firm is taking to the Mining Indaba in Cape Town.